Vikings fans, this is Morning Joe's. The
I'm,
only.
I'm sorry,
Well,
go ahead.
oh, no.
I just stomped all over your touchdown call. Go ahead.
I was going to say, this is the only morning show solely dedicated to the Minnesota Vikings. I am Joe Johnson, owner of PurplePTSD.com and VikingsTerritory.com. Here with Joe Oberly, who
Playing the role of Pete Bursich today to your Paul Allen stomping it.
It's as long as you're not Spielman's brother, I'm happy. Joe is the editor of Purple PTSD and Vikings Territory. He also writes for the Sports Post. And I take it you were at the game Sunday?
Yes. Yep. Back in after missing the Saints game. Should have been there as well, but I was out of town. But yes, I was back in the U.S. Bank Stadium, and it was normalcy restored. You know, the Vikings really did exactly what you had hoped / expected, perhaps, with fingers crossed, that they would do. Because the Lions are an up and down team. They're not very solid. They have a new coach that seems to be as bewildered as John Gruden now is, and they're a little erratic. I saw a story yesterday about how Matt Stafford is uber talented, but has to carry the whole team, and he doesn't have a Calvin Johnson anymore, and he kind of does. And when the Vikings got after him like they did, they dominated the game. I mean, I think some people are chagrined that the Vikings don't run up the score on teams like this, which they potentially could have, but they didn't have the greatest offensive output. But they didn't.
Yeah. And there were some things where, like, there were parts in the game where you felt like they could have pulled away, but then there was, like, the play that, the style of play that they have to stop doing, which is these, like, backwards passes, laterals. There was a few opportunities where you felt like the game could have gone differently, but it didn't. It definitely felt like a bigger win than 24-9. It was an all-around good game. For the defense,
that point you just made, that on the backwards pass, people are really belly aching about that as well, and I get it. They've had a couple fumbles on laterals or sideways pitches, but I'll be honest, it might not have worked that play because there were some guys waiting for Cook over there, but that's going to work though, because you get the ball in his hands with a head of steam running in any direction, and that's in a little space. I kind of like it. I would like to see them get better at their pitches or their sideways passes and catches, but I think that's something that can, like we saw him in space later once he got through to the second level and he went for 70.
Yeah.
I'm pretty exciting about that.
Yeah, it was kind of the tale of two different things. It was great to see what the Vikings have been missing with Dalvin Cook coming back, and then on the other side of it, you could feel like the palpable just how much the Lions missed Golden Tate. A lot of those sacks seemed to be coverage sacks, and that move looked bad at the time. It seems to be looking worse every day.
Yeah, I to this day, I mean, I don't understand it. I didn't understand it at the time, and yeah, like you just said, after you see what the result is, at least in the first week, it looks even worse. They had three decent receivers there in Galladay and Jones Jr. and Golden Tate, and when you got three targets like that, any one of them can step up on a certain day and be the guy, and that's what it has been. I've got Matt Jones on my or Marvin Jones on one of my teams, and I've been sitting them because you can't predict which guy's going to be the guy there for Detroit, but someone's going to have a big day. Sometimes it's Galladay, sometimes it's Tate who is leading the team in reception or touchdowns, and they just trade him away. Maybe they didn't think they were going to be able to re-sign him, or I don't know what. I don't get it. But
he's had 4 seasons in a row with over 90 receptions. He's had a couple 100-yard. Though that's like trying to fill Adam Thielen's position. on the Vikings in regards to just his output. So, yeah, I don't know if Stafford... It'll be interesting to see. There's been talk. I've always leaned this way, too, that maybe Stafford was more of the product of Megatron or the system. And so this is the first time where he's really had to do it on his own, and it doesn't look like it's going to be going too well. But they were only one game out of first place. That move makes absolutely no sense. And we'll talk about the game a lot in depth. That's the point of the show today. But I wanted to touch on a couple things in the news really quickly, get your point of view on them, because obviously you've covered the NFL longer than I have, and it's sad, but it's also interesting just as a case study. I'm referring to the Sharif Floyd lawsuit that has been kind of dominating Vikings news the last 24 hours. It's a massive lawsuit. It's I think it's $180 million.
Yeah.
Against Dr. James Andrews, who is well known to Vikings fans because he's Brett Favre's go-to guy. I guess the reason I bring it up mainly is I don't remember if I've ever seen anything like this before, and you would think that when somebody goes in for surgery that there's a certain amount of risk, and that's kind of waived or agreed upon by the parties before surgery. From what I understand, it sounds like, at least what Floyd is claiming, is that they said it would be an arthroscopic procedure, that he'd be out 3 to 4 weeks, and for whatever reason, they ended up doing something more intrusive or something that they didn't originally agree to, and then they, for whatever reason, again, they injected some painkillers into his nerve directly, and that's what ended up killing his nerve. 2 questions there. I don't know if you've ever witnessed a player sue a doctor for a career-ending injury before, or if at the time, if you recall with Floyd, how things were being communicated to the media. Because I know Zimmer was kind of losing his patience with him in regards to being out because of injuries. And so I wasn't sure if at the time people were saying, they're cleaning up his knee, it should only be like a 2 to 3 week thing, or just the whole ball of wax.
Well, first things first, you said obviously I covered the league longer. What's the deal? You can't see me. You don't know how old I am. What are you talking about?
Fake news.
I'm kidding. I have not, that I can recall. I'm sure it's probably happened somewhere along the lines, maybe on not as frontal to Vikings fans or people covering them here. You said it. There's risk in every surgery. My father-in-law just had surgery for some cancerous things removed from his vocal cords, and that part went well, but they nicked his inside of his throat on the during the thing, and so there's a little internal bleeding. He's fine, but there is a risk in every surgery, every time you go under anesthesia, what have you. So these guys, I don't think it happens often because they're going to the best. I think not only Brett Favre, but I think Andrews did Peterson's. I'm not sure if
he did. You're right.
Since ACL, and he's a go-to guy for certain kind of surgeries like this. And so generally these things don't happen. When they're operating on multi-million-dollar people for multi-million-dollar organizations in a billion-dollar league, that it's pretty. They got to take care and do their best and be on their P's and Q's and not just walk off the golf course before they perform surgery. So I don't know. It's a strange thing. I think, in this case, he's probably shooting the moon a little bit. His career was way prematurely ended. He has to maybe try to recoup some of his potential salary. I don't know what kind of waivers they sign beforehand to indemnify the doctors and what have you, but that's something that they probably do. The interesting thing is that he has this recourse, and we'll see how it comes out. It will be interesting, but the Vikings really are the biggest losers. Well, I shouldn't say that. Sharif is. I don't want to take anything away from him. That's a a tragic thing. But the Vikings, who drafted him and paid him and waited for him and hoped that he came back, really didn't get much out of it, And
Yeah.
Good thing news is that it sounds like they are not, people involved in the lawsuit. They may be called in to testify.
Yeah, it said, the article I read said that he did sue them last season. He filed a grievance because he was owed like $6.75 million, and they paid him $2 million, and that grievance hasn't been settled yet. But yeah, it is separate. I do.
With the NFLPA, is that grievance, or are they handling that? Or?
Yeah, I believe so. What's interesting about this too is just the precedent that it'll set legally. You have to think that if Dr. James Andrews is personally liable, or the clinic that he operates through, I'm sure it's not his personal money. That's why they separate these things. But you have to worry then that maybe some doctors might not take certain surgeries because they'll be worried about the reputation or the money that they might lose, or their careers might be tarnished. So maybe high-profile stuff like this might not be worth it should he lose. I can't imagine, unless he did something super egregious and decided off the cuff during the surgery to do something experimental, that he would lose. But that doesn't seem to be the MO with this guy. So
they also have doctors will have malpractice insurance as well, I'm sure. So
definitely
not going to be much out of his pocket. Maybe it's some kind of thing that sets a precedent. You never know. I'm not sure. I didn't look into it too far. I'm just saddened because the Vikings defensive line has certainly rebounded in the loss of him, but he was to figure into this team for a long time, and I know they really wanted him on the field. They liked what he could do. He was a very smart ball player and good at what he was doing, and we never really got to see him hardly at all. He was injured far too early in his career, so it's a shame.
Let's get into Tuesday's Tales of the Tape, since a lot of those tie into the game and the big news storylines coming out of it.
Okay. Well, I can run down those for you. The first one I had, like I said, 10 sacks. Any and all discussions must start with this. And, it was huge. It was, as I was sitting at the game watching it, I turned to people next to me and I said, God, this is almost like Archie Manning territory. If you remember when Archie Manning was the quarterback of the Vikings that one sad year, and the I think it was the 95 or 80 or 85 Bears or whoever came in, and they're their Super Bowl team, and they sacked him 17 times.
Ooh.
Game, and I think it's still an NFL record. I should have looked that up beforehand, but it's so it was amazing. The Vikings could not protect this guy. He couldn't move, and he just got pummeled. And I think that was his last time. That was his last year of his career, unfortunately, but pretty inauspicious. But anyway, I believe the Vikings also had 17 quarterback hits on Stafford, which was quite remarkable. With those 10 sacks. And the thing that happened, one more point, it happened to an offensive line that, someone had written, I can't remember who for our site wrote a story that said that this offensive line had allowed the second fewest quarterback hits all season on Stafford. And suddenly, the Vikings get to him 10 times. It's amazing.
It was amazing. And as a team, the Vikings had 21 sacks going into this game, and they basically doubled it. Or they doubled that. I don't know percentage-wise. Yeah, 50% of it. There you go. It's interesting, too, looking back at, we talked on Friday about the games that Stafford has had against the Vikings, especially the Zimmer-led Vikings, and it seems like it's 50-50. Either he has like a career day and the Vikings lose, or the Vikings sack him a ton and the Vikings end up winning. It's, I think, 3 of the top 5 games for him in regards to being sacked the most are against the Vikings. They've had a ton of huge days against him. Not dissimilar to how things used to be with Jared Allen against the Packers. Right. It was really amazing to watch. Danielle Hunter is they talked a lot about this on the show or on the live coverage, that he doesn't get a lot of national respect in regards to the top guys in the league. After this game, he has to be. I mean, he's leading the league. He's just on fire. And bringing back Everson Griffin, I think it was a good representation of what this D-line at its apex can do with Everson back, with Sheldon playing, with Linval back.
Johnson had a great game yesterday.
He had
2.5 sacks where Daniil had 3, and he's just been playing very good since he got back here. So.
Shamar Stephen Weatherly, rather, was great as well. I don't know if they were necessarily blitzing more often or if they were getting just sacks with their rush.
These were primarily, it wasn't totally because Mackenzie Alexander had one, but it was primarily rushing 4, and I said that to the people sitting next to me. Man, they're doing this by just rushing 4, and let me throw out a theory there, Joe, that you brought up Everson Griffin. When he went down, when he was all of a sudden ruled out in Buffalo Bills game, I believe they had their worst game of the season. You can point. Some people pointed to that, and I don't disallow it. Is that this team was kind of shocked at what happened with Griffin and were confused, and it affected their mentality going into the game, and they just laid a massive dodo egg. And it could be a case where the Vikings got the Lions at the right time. They lost one of their leaders on offense, in Golden Tate, and I think they were confused, and there were some problems, some carping a little bit in the media, and maybe this was a case of that. Is like they come out there and say, well, what are we doing out here? They take away our best offensive player, and all of a sudden somebody just doesn't have that mental edge, and you might have seen the result. I don't know if it's true, but I'm just throwing it out there. The Vikings definitely caught the Lions at the right time in that game.
You would have to think too that this game, the Saints game, the way the defense showed up, it should terrify the rest of the league. I feel a lot more confident just as a fan or as a writer. I feel like the team is found its stride. I don't know if you want to chalk that up to simplifying the defense or making the right calls at the right time or just having the guys back. I think it's a combination of the first and the last one especially. All of a sudden this team is 5-3-1. They have a bye week to get all their guys back, and they should have beat a Saints team that just beat the Rams by 10 points. So, everything's getting to the point it needs to be, and I couldn't be more excited, to be honest with you. I'm really bullish on this team right now.
Yeah, the second tail of the tape I have, just to take your excitement and grind it into the dirt. 164 yards passing for Cousins.
Yeah.
Lowest as a Viking. Is that a good sign for the run game or a bad sign for Cousins? Related to that, of course, was Adam Thielen had 4 catches for 22 yards, but we'll talk about that later. It had to be. I think it's maybe don't have to look any further than the Lions. I mean, the Vikings were missing one of their big playmakers on offense.
Definitely.
And I think we're going to talk about this, but it certainly affected both Thielen's numbers and Cousins' numbers. They emphasized the run against this team, which was a good thing. They ran the ball very well against them. Certainly with the return of Dalvin Cook, and he was supposed to be on a pitch count, but he got 10 rushes for I believe 89 yards. And
yep.
Latavius Murray got 10 as well. So it was just maybe a different game plan. Maybe that's the way you do it. You're missing your top one of your top receivers, so you plug in a very top running back, another weapon, and supplement what the pounding that Latavius Murray is responsible for, and suddenly you have a different looking offense, but still a pretty effective one. Not great, but certainly enough to win the game. They went right down and scored the first series. Cousins did not look great, but he didn't look bad.
Yeah.
He was 18 for 22, I believe, which is pretty nice passing. I just don't think they passed as much.
No, and it's I guess a positive to say that they still won handily without having to air the ball out as much as they were a few weeks ago. I think that some of that might be, I mean, like you said, his completion percentage was good, so perhaps they were just calling a more conservative game. There was, I think, one play that could have changed how we viewed the passing offense's day, and that was the deep ball to Aldrick Robinson that hit him right in the hands. That would have been a touchdown. That would have
tough catch to make. He was coming around the defender and had to kind of turn and see and grab it. And Thielen could have made that catch. Just kidding. But tough catch. But yeah, catchable. He could have made that grab, and it would have changed things. Yeah, it certainly would have augmented the passing stats. That's for sure.
And then you have a guy like Chad Beebe who hasn't played with Cousins very much. He was a preseason all-star, but you wonder what that means in relation to maybe like a Brandon Zylstra, how much of the playbook they can use, so on and so forth. But this was the type of game that I expected earlier in the season. Defense just shutting the teams down, maybe the passing offense struggling a little bit. But like you said, they didn't need to. At no point during this game did they feel like they were going to lose it. So
I wonder if Cousins' passing yards total has anything to do with the fact that he's a Big Ten guy.
I got a few of those. I'll just check that off my list.
Just kidding.
I love it because it's true.
You got something else on that?
No, I just think that it's makes me feel like once this team is firing on all cylinders, every facet of the team is playing well, they're going to be a really scary team.
And we want them to do that in November, December, don't we?
Big time.
Rather than worry about it in September and October, which we have for the past 8 weeks, but that's okay.
I've been completely calm and fine during this transition period. I don't know what you're talking about.
Third number, of course, kind of mentioned it a couple seconds ago, but it's worth repeating. Dalvin Cook returns 10 rushes for 89 yards and 4 receptions for 20 yards. Just awesome to see. I got to believe when I saw him, I thought about it before the game. I put him in one of my lineups and just hoping that even despite the fact that I knew he was not supposed to be on a pitch count, and I was thinking, maybe he can bust one, and then I thought immediately, oh my God, this guy busts one, starts stretching out like a racehorse, and there goes the hammy again. And I was certainly thinking as he was running down, but it sounds like he was too. He said that he was thinking about it, so he didn't go into his fourth gear or his fifth gear or whatever.
Okay.
And Zimmer
I hadn't heard that.
Yeah, Zimmer says if that guy's got another gear after that, let's see it. He was moving. You must have seen the stat. Someone came across 22 miles an hour, 22 point something, the fastest any running back has been clocked at this season, which I find hard to believe. But
I hadn't seen that, but I love those next gen stats or whatever that they get with the chip in the shoulder pads. I never thought of Dalvin Cook as a guy with that top end speed. I thought he was quick. I thought he was fast, but I didn't think he was up there with Adrian Peterson or Michael Bennett.
Faster than Peterson now, but I mean, you got guys like Tyreek Hill and Kareem Hunt in the league. So it was kind of interesting to hear. I mean, Kareem Hunt, is that his name? He got a 50 touchdown reception yesterday. So I don't know if he was as wide open as running as Cook was. And it was only saddened me was that Cook got caught, at about the 5-yard line or whatever. But by one of the defenders. But anyway,
with him too. Spielman's brother mentioned that he looked more confident in the way that he was running the ball too. He looked more Dalvin Cook-esque in regards to hitting his cuts a little more aggressively, which is one of the main things that he's known for. So that's why I was surprised by the quote you gave me, which was that he didn't put it into the top gear because he didn't want to re-inflame that hammy. Yeah, so outside of that, he looked to be running extremely aggressively and felt more like he did early last season than we'd seen him earlier this season. So
I would conjecture that he's still not back, just because I think it takes you almost a season after you have a major surgery like that to really, feel like that's your knee totally. I mean, I think he's getting there. He looks fine, but it's almost, I compare it in my mind to the way Latavius Murray looked last year coming off the ankle injury. He's a much stronger, more confident, powerful runner this year. Everybody's said it. Everybody's seen it. And I think it's going to take Cook most of the season to get that mentality back, and I think he will. I mean, it showed us on Sunday that it's coming and it's going to get there. I think it's great timing for the Vikings to now have this time off, so maybe he can do a little more rehab, a little rest, and he's all fired up. He's going to be chomping at the bit come next Sunday night, or 2 Sunday nights from now against the Bears, because he got a taste, and I think he wants more, so it's pretty exciting.
And I mentioned this before too, but can you imagine this defense add the passing game from earlier this season and a more dynamic running game with the ability to break on pretty much any play? I do feel like things are falling into place at the right time. So
it'll be interesting to see how they use them both, don't you think, Joe? I mean, I that myself. I was a little surprised yesterday. It looked, like I said, 10 rushes apiece, and Latavius had 1 reception, like 22 yards, I think, and Cook had 4. So they're going to lean a little heavier on Cook as he gets stronger and gets back, but I don't want to put Murray on the shelf. He's a huge value to this team, and
big time.
And the fact that they kept 4 running backs certainly tells you that it's part of their game plan to have a strong running game alongside Cousins and these receivers. This offense can suddenly, if it's all healthy and all up to speed, it's really. It could make some noise. It can do some damage. It deserves to be up there with the Ramses and the Drew Brees-led Saints and such like that.
And a big part of like the big run that Cook had is he had a great hole on that left side with Riley Reif being back. It looked like the offensive line was playing a lot better. I saw there was one. I think Cousins was sacked once. We were looking for pressure numbers before the show, but couldn't find them. But a lot of what we talked about, this is a good place to kind of bring this up, is Brian O'Neill getting the nod over at right tackle, getting...
Before you go, just a second, I just got a news flash. I mean, this is a live show, so we got to give news breaks, right? We don't have a sounder, but you could make some noise, Joe. The Vikings signed Storm Norton to their practice squad. So there you go.
Game over.
Like this guy, he's been on, off, and on and off and on and off, and now he's back on. So
maybe it's the name, or
could be.
I remember when we were standing next to each other at training camp. It was a day or two after Tony Sperano had died and Storm Norton was taking a knee, and all the other linemen were standing up, and I forget which interim coach it was, but he looked at him and goes, "What the fuck you doing? Get your ass over here. Don't sit down." And I was like, man, these coaches are not messing around with these linemen. So good for Storm. I thought he'd be in the doghouse after that, but I guess not. But yeah, I mean, it's as long as Rashad Hill isn't playing, I'm happy, I guess. I'm more confident that the run game will continue to improve.
You were talking about Brian O'Neill, and there are people that are just hot and cold on this guy, and I have been bullish since day one. I thought he had the attitude. I knew he didn't have the experience or the size, but I knew they were going to get there. He was going to get there one way or the other. He's going to try to put on some weight, but they also wanted him for his his athletic ability to, which has got to be a huge part of being an offensive lineman. And he seemed like the mentality that really wanted to do well and learn the position. So I thought it was only a matter of time. I'm not going to say he's perfect. There's plenty of people out there that would like to see him back on the bench, but I'm not one of them. So I like the fact that there seems to be a slow progression with him along, and he's not making too many egregious errors. He does get beat from time to time. So does everybody else. It's going to happen. The defensive linemen are some of your biggest and best and strongest athletes in the game. So it's going to happen. It's just going to happen that way. So
the fact that he's not only contributing but starting is amazing, considering. I mean, I was one of those people that were relatively incensed by the draft.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of that got worse during training camp with the reports that he might not be able to contribute for 2 to 3 years. Or I think Luke Braun from Purple Journal podcast said that if he wasn't a third-round pick, he would have been cut by now. And I was like, that really stuck with me. So the fact that he's doing what he's doing is amazing, and it's super encouraging, because you have to think he'll get better as the season goes on as well, because the things he's getting beat on, I mean, some of it is his size. He's getting pushed back by some more physical defensive ends, but a lot of it is stuff that you don't feel like you did with TJ Clemmings or with Rashad Hill. You feel like he's figuring it out, that there's the bad plays are getting fewer and further between. I'm happy about that.
So much of it is footwork, which goes to athleticism and quickness. If he can move his feet and figure out the footwork and get in front of these guys, figure out then how to use his hands better and how to leverage and get below the pad level on these guys, and or whatever it is that offensive lineman does, and I think he will get there. He impresses me as someone, and I'll admit I pulled it out of my tailpipe, but I said, speaking of Purple Journal, that was my prediction, that he was going to be on the right tackle before too long. And you guys were amazed at me, but I was trying to be bold, and
it paid off.
Now he's making me look good. I'm not going to say I knew anything more, but I just felt that it was an attitude that I saw in him that I was really impressed with, and when he was answering questions and stuff, and
he did seem older than his years.
Yeah,
I remember seeing him answer questions about Sperano, and he sounded like a guy in his 30s. You got this impression. Yeah, you did get that. I got that impression anyway.
Yeah, I think hopefully it continues for him, because if it does, it's huge for the Vikings, and they aren't so desperate next year when they go into the draft and they can pluck one out in the 7th round again and really tick you off, Joe. No, I'm just kidding. I think it's still a priority for them. They will need a guard, and maybe another tackle that can come up behind someone like Grief, who's not going to be around forever. He's an older guy, so they have to keep bolstering, and I think they should use some high draft picks to do so. But in the meantime, I'm cautiously optimistic with O'Neal, and hopefully a healthy Reef. That this other week off is going to help him get back into the line.
Do you think that if he continues to play well, they'll move him to left tackle during the off season? I've heard some people say that they'll get rid of Reef and free up some salary cap or so on and so forth. I would hate for them to have the winning formula and then to break it up just because we've struggled at finding that exact thing this decade.
It's a good question. I don't know that I would do that. If you got a guy coming from a tight end to right tackle in the NFL, boom, and now you're in the next year, you're going to have him change his footwork and work from the other side. If he's that good, maybe, but your faster people are probably your better defensive linemen are over on the left side. But I think only if I don't know that the Vikings are a position with depth and on the offensive line to do that yet. Maybe 2 years down the road, but I don't think next year. Next year's going to be next year's where you really got to start looking at this team as a legitimate Super Bowl contender if they keep progressing. I'm not saying I'm not hopeful this year, but a second year with Cousins, the defense hopefully solidified, the offensive line tweaked in attitude, and this offense. And I think you've got to look at next year as when they're going to start peaking, second year of Cousins and maybe the third year. Hopefully Filippo sticks around. Anyway.
That's just to really quickly follow up on that. It is interesting. We talked about that on our shows a lot too. But you get this sense from fans that, like, it's all or nothing this season, and that's not, I mean, Danielle Hunter is signed through 2023, there's a lot of guys that are going to be around for a long time, so we could just be at the very beginning of our own little dynasty, knock on wood.
You should be able to be battling for the division for the foreseeable future.
Definitely.
Two more tails to go. One of them is 2 turnovers. The Vikings actually lost the turnover battle but won the game, which is rare for them since it was all so far this season. Every time they lost the turnover battle, they lost the game, which is generally what NFL teams do. So it was huge to see it happen. There were two big ones. Clearly, I can't remember the first one. The second one was obviously a fumbled pitch that I don't know what Stafford was doing.
The first one was about 10 minutes left in the second quarter. Cousins threw it up, and I think it was the safety that picked it off on the sideline.
Oh, yes. That's right.
So I'm watching I'm rewatching the game live right now on mute. Yeah, it was a bad throw.
Yeah, he threw into double coverage and made just an easy interception for Darius Slay.
Yep.
And it was probably one of his worst passes of the year. And he had a couple guys coming in on him, but I think he then throw it away. And there was a little bit of forcing into Adam Thielen going on, and that was certainly a play where you saw it. So you got to hang that one on Cousins. I mean, it was so bad. Thielen didn't even make an attempt. He just kept running out of bounds because he had no chance at it. And, Slay made a play. He was covering someone else, saw what was happening, and left his coverage and jumped in front.
I think the biggest difference between the Vikings defense now and the Vikings defense earlier in the season, I remember on Purple Journal podcast this past week, Luke was talking about at one point during the Saints game, you could tell like the fight had gone out of the defense and that resiliency was gone. And I'm watching the drive right now after that interception. The defense, I believe, held them to a field goal. They let them get down to about between the 10 and the 5 and the 10, but they did it's a bend don't break. A couple weeks ago that would have been a touchdown.
Right.
And so it's always bad to have those turnovers because the games we've lost to the Lions have been by points these last couple seasons, and it's come down to stuff like that. Yeah. So it was just huge to see the defense not get down and really save the game.
Yeah, that play was a gift. There's no two ways about it. Stafford, I don't know why he did it. He wouldn't have got much more. The running back wouldn't have got much more.
On Stafford's lateral? Yeah. What was that?
That was a Detroit Motor City Kitty gift to the it was like he should have just taken his medicine and gone down or whatever, but he decided to pitch it, and they were down and they were trying to make something happen, but he finished it iced the game for the Vikings. I mean, the look on Danielle Hunter's face, and he's such a good athlete. He scooped it up on the run and just basically jogged when he was just smiling ear to ear. It was the perfect icing on the cake for him of a great day.
Was that his first touch? I believe it is Hunter's first touchdown. You could tell he was super excited. Can you imagine having to tackle that guy, though? Yikes. No, thank you. Yeah. But in Stafford's defense, I don't understand it logically either. Like, he was already 3 yards ahead of the running back. They were both running out of bounds. I don't know what he expected to gain from that. But if he did make eye contact with the running back and kind of like give him the heads up it was coming, but I think he pitched it too high.
Yeah, that's sandlot football. I mean, he was almost rugby-like. You're running, you see a guy in front of you, or what do they call the option in college? Or you're running outside, and you can We ran that in high school for forever. We ran it wild. The quarterback's out there sprinting out, and then the running backs behind him trailing for that pitch, and it worked well because when in the high school teams we played, they weren't pros.
Yeah, so. That pretty much sums it up. Did you notice at the game that, or hear about that Stafford got hit in the eye by one of the rubber pellets?
Yes. They showed him at least on the replay TVs that we had up in the press boxes. They were cleaning out his eye, and I think he missed one play or something. They're kind of washed out, And I saw another team later in the day. I was watching football when I got home, and I think it happened to another player too. It was
weird. Yeah, I'd never seen that before, and thought that summed up the Lions pretty well.
My final tale of the tape, Tuesday's tale of tape, is 12 days to the next game, which is great for the Vikings on many levels, I think. Most of all, obviously, healing your players. And Zimmer did say in his press conference he's hopeful that all the guys that missed this week, like Zendejo and Barr and Compton, and I think that's it, or maybe a couple others, are going to be back for that game. Can't guarantee it, but that they're hopeful that this kind of break is going to get them back there, and that would be good. It's also going to help, players such as Xavier Rhodes and Cook, who are maybe not fully healthy, but gives them a little more time. And Rhodes played well, coming out there. He was. We got a thing up in the press box where it showed that, or we saw something online, I guess, that they originally had Rhodes penciled in on the inactives, and then they scratched him out at the last minute. So he was almost going to be sitting as well. And
it's astounding that he's back.
Yes, yeah, he played well too. He had a decent game. But the biggest thing I want to mention before you go is this 12 days is also a good thing for the Vikings, because I should say the coaching staff, because when they had their Thursday night game, they had an extra time to prepare for Philly on the road, and they had a great game plan against him. And I'm hopeful for the same thing with the Bears. The Bears got to play this week. The Vikings don't.
Yeah.
And the Vikings have trouble going into Soldier Field, as we all know, and I will write about it for the umpteenth billion time when I write my preview this week. So I'm hopeful that they get a chance to look things over and see how they can thwart Mitch Trubisky, and it's a matter of he's a running quarterback, so they're going to have to do something there, and it would be nice to see him throw some stuff at him like they threw at Stafford this week. So I think the break gives them
big time
an opportunity to really game plan for these guys.
If as writers or fans we could have picked a week to have the bye week before the season started, it would have been now. The next month is going to determine who wins the division. It's crazy. You can take Detroit out of that conversation, but for the Bears, for example, their next 3 games are the Lions, the Vikings, and then the Lions again. We have the bye, the Bears, then the Packers, and the Packers have Miami, Seattle, and the Vikings. So having those 12 days to get everybody back and healthy, it's going to be huge, because they're going to need all hands on deck. You're right. I don't know. The Bears haven't been that great this decade, but Soldier Field is a B word for the Vikings to play in, and it's something that obviously a must-win game. I mean, the Bears are in first place. We're a half game back. They almost beat the Packers too. I mean, this team, Bears team is no joke.
They're a decent team. There's no two ways about it, and we don't want to focus too much on that. We'll do that on Friday. But they are a decent team that is surprising a little. They had a little bit of a light schedule, and unfortunately, they have a little bit of a light schedule the rest of the way. So if there's ever you're going to allow Zimmer and everybody, all those other players, to quote the cliche, it's a divisional game. It's big. This is the one. I mean, the Vikings can pretty much, if they hold serve on the rest of their division games and sweep all of them, there's nobody that's going to beat them in this division. It's there, and it's a tough NFC, so they just need to get in the playoff pool. But I I think the Packers jobbers are down. I think and I know you wanted to talk about the NFC North a little bit. Maybe we can do that now. But
yeah.
I think the Packers, after that loss to the Patriots, even though nobody expected them to win, I didn't. All the world hyped it like it was going to be this big game, but ironically, Brady didn't. Brady and the Patriots beat him without Brady throwing a touchdown pass. That was kind of interesting. But I don't think. I think they're going to come into Minnesota and it's going to be rocking, and so the Vikings are going to. I believe they'll win. They're just not the same team without a solid Rodgers. He's good, but he's a little bit nicked up, and the rest of the team is just not there yet. They may be on the rise, but not yet. The Lions, we saw who they are, and I don't think we'll have trouble. The Vikings will have trouble going into Detroit to beat them. It's the Bears. The Bears. This is a huge game. If they can grab first place from the Bears in 2 weeks, when the Bears come to town. At the end of the season, it will be a huge game. It will be for the division, and I think the Vikings will be in a great position to.
The guy that scheduled that final game of the season must be getting a raise, because the NFL did announce just this morning that they flexed the Bears game, the next game. Yeah. So that'll be a night game. That team scares me. Khalil Mack scares me. I fall into the same group as you in regards to the Packers. I think that they're not that good of a team. Rodgers is always a threat, but he's banged up, and I've gotten some conflicting responses from the Packers fans I interact with in regards to that Clinton Dix thing. A few of them said, get him out of here. He's a huge pain in the locker room. But I also heard from other people that they were just confused by it, why they would, make that move and get rid of one of the leaders in the locker room with all the young guys that they have. Because I saw Vikings fans kind of conflating that with the Golden Tate thing and saying it's two teams that clearly realize they don't have what it takes this season. I don't think that was the case with the Packers, but they've made some dubious moves. There was moves before the season started where the media was basically saying they're making decisions without Aaron Rodgers' not consent, but he didn't even know about it. Firing the quarterback coach or so on and so forth. So the best way to put it, I think, is if the Packers didn't have Aaron Rodgers, they'd be like a 2-14 team.
Yeah, it might be a little. Yeah, if they didn't have Rodgers, it would be interesting to see what they had. They've got new coordinators. They've got new a number of new players. They now, you can see, are not the Ted Turner Packers anymore, where they're not afraid to make moves. They're not afraid to trade and sign free agents. So I think they will come back, quicker. The Vikings, they're never dead with Rodgers. They're just never, especially in against the Vikings. So he will be tough to handle. But
do you think that
the offensive line and so he's not 100% foolproof? You take this defensive line of the Vikings and you go against a banged up offensive line of the Packers and they can make it hell for him. What were you gonna say?
I just we talked about this last week, but Brady saying that if Rodgers played for the Patriots, he'd have 7,000 yards season, and there were some people saying like this is the testament to how much the Packers have wasted this time with Aaron Rodgers. And my question was, do you think that history will look back at the Aaron Rodgers era of the Packers and say that they did waste him, and by they, pardon me, meaning Ted Thompson, in this
Turner? Did I say
Ted Turner?
It's Ted Thompson. I think I said Ted Turner.
It's better than Ike Turner. But not when you have a guy like that in today's NFL, and you don't pursue any free agents, you have to think that you have like the best draft scouting in the universe.
Yep.
But I think that maybe Rodgers' success kept McCarthy and him around longer than they otherwise would have been, and maybe people look back and say, man, one Super Bowl with that guy, perhaps that's the culprit.
I would bet you'd get a lot of Packers to agree with what you just said. As far as I'm concerned, I hope they look back on it that way, and that would mean that there is no more Super Bowls for the Packers in the Rodgers era. But I think this with Patine, I think that's his name, as the new defensive coordinator, they're going to get stronger. He's a good coach. He knows what he's doing. He's going to draft right, and he's going to get people in position to play. So I think in the tail end here of his career, I don't know how much longer he'll play. The Packers are going to be fine. Aaron Jones looks like a decent runner. They've got some up and coming receivers for him to throw to, and they by getting rid of Jordy Nelson, that's a bold move.
Yeah.
At the beginning of the year, and so they've seen. I think they are going to start building with younger players and try to quickly get things back up to speed. They've had a little bad luck with the Aaron Rodgers position past year, but with him getting injured. But that stuff's got to eventually catch up to you. It does to everybody else. So I will not say that they're going to do that yet until I don't want to jinx it. I want no more. Want no more Super Bowls for the Packers. I want no more divisions for Aaron Rodgers while the Vikings are on their ascension. So it'll be nice. It'll be great football to watch, to see Cousins next year, even with more of a command of this offense and maybe even a little bit better offensive line going head-to-head with the Packers. It's going to be fun. That's looking ahead. There's got a big game coming up that when the Vikings do play the Packers, it's going to be a battle. But I would say I'm hopeful that's what happens. But I think the people that are in charge now, Ted Thompson is not. I think things are going to change quickly for this team, and they're going to make the right move. And I would agree with you. McCarthy has definitely benefited from both Favre and Rodgers as his quarterbacks. There's no two ways about it.
Speaking of benefiting from other people, it was obvious that the Lions wanted to stop Adam Thielen. They had that luxury because Diggs didn't play, which was unfortunate because I know he wanted to really show that he could make it a full season this off season. Right. So that makes you think that his ribs are really messed up. But I felt like one of the bigger winners, if you want to look at the game that way, from Sunday was Diggs, and he's been kind of the silent party to Thielen's amazing start. The coverages he draws, the ability that he has. It would have been awesome to see Thielen break that record, but I think he'd be the first person to say that he'd rather have the win anyway.
Oh, absolutely.
But did you, from your point of view, seeing the game as a whole as opposed to what the TV shows you, was Thielen just getting tripled basically all day? My dad was at the game and he said something like that.
Yeah, I didn't see tripled that often, and I didn't pay attention to it that much. I will say I'm a little bit bitter because I picked Thielen to break the record in our Purple Journal prediction segment, and had I known Diggs wasn't going to play, I don't know if I'd have picked that one. I'm saying that right now because what we expected to happen was to play out. You're going against Megatron's former team. They've got a decent secondary. They don't have to pick their poison in Diggs and Thielen. They can, going against a quarterback who likes to survey the field and find the open receiver, they can clamp down on Thielen and take away his effectiveness. He can run all the great routes he wants, but if they got two guys, a safety folding over the top on him all the time, you're just not going to go there. He had 7 targets, and it almost seemed high with how much coverage they had on him. So it was. We have all said this on our show from day one. I think early on we said that. I remember asking the question on Purple Journal is like they are the benefit of each other, and Adam Thielen is the benefit of Diggs on the field because Diggs was supposed to be, he got the big money. He was supposed to have the big season, and the all season long, the opposing defenses and defensive coordinators have picked the poison of Diggs and put, run a little more double coverage on him and let Thielen go. And Thielen's going to, go in the slot and burn who's ever covered him there and make hay. Well, and Cousins is going to find that. Yeah, they need them both on the field. And I'm glad they held out Diggs because get him ready for the stretch run. They might not have needed him against the Lions apparently. So hopefully he's ready to go when they do play the Bears. But they're a duo. in every sense of the word, in their production, and I think in how they play off each other. It's I hope they get Thielen signs, probably extend him soon again, and keep these guys around for a while.
It is amazing how much that ended up proving itself. And you touched on everything perfectly, but I just wanted to add in regards to wide receiver duos. I know Moss and Carter had like a father-son type relationship, but you really get the sense from these two guys being always the first to congratulate the other after a touchdown or a big play that these guys are like brothers that really do. They have a healthy competition.
Right.
He got his, now I got to get mine, sort of thing.
Right.
But in today's like NFL and just world, having that camaraderie is rare, and I think it's really cool.
You made a good point earlier that Diggs benefited from this, and I'll agree with you, because this has been my fear since this has been happening all season. Diggs got the money, Diggs got the attention, he got the miracle, blah blah blah, and he's probably ready to take the next step. And I feared the whole season long with Thielen just getting mega attention. Did you know that he went to Mankato State?
What?
Yes.
He paid for his own tryout?
I worried about, the diva quotient. Diggs is a decent guy. I've never felt that he was a diva, but after a while, all of a sudden you can see some jealousy perhaps cropping up, and I worried about it. And that's just not there. These two guys are like brothers who are want to compete, but they see the big picture. It's all about getting wins for the team. And so I'm happy that by sitting out, Diggs got this little see, I told prove it there. It says that he is needed for Thielen to get his, and vice versa. So it reinforces that. I think it bodes well for going forward for their relationship in the offensive or the wide receiver room. So
I wanted to touch on too really quickly what your thoughts were on Barr's season in relation to his pending contract negotiations or extension. It seems like Wilson is played well.
Mm-hmm.
In his stead, I looked up his Pro Football Focus numbers to compare the two between, and I was actually a little surprised that I thought, well, I'll just read them and get your take on it. It just said, as general defense, Barr has a 68.1, Wilson has a 61.4. Against the run, it's Barr with 81.6 and Wilson with 64.4. In the mid-60s is above average. The 81.6 is almost elite. And I think, in coverage.
Who's that? Who's at the 81? Wilson or
Barr against the run, yeah. And then in coverage, Barr has a 51.8 and Wilson has a 56.5. So it looks like Barr has been really good against the run, and that Wilson has the nod on him in regards to coverage by a little bit.
I saw this on the agenda. I thought it's an interesting question. I didn't, for me, Wilson didn't flash as much when I was watching the game as maybe he has, perhaps, and the numbers will bear out. But I've been pretty tough on Barr. Before the season, I wanted him signed because I thought, keep these guys all together. As the season, started, he struggled. The Rams game, oh my gosh, he was chasing people into the end zone, Todd Gurley, and he looked really bad. Well, then they changed up the defense, and all of a sudden he started playing better like he's used to, and he started making better plays than splash plays. What I will say in defense of that is I don't know that they ask Wilson to do the things they ask Barr to. Because he goes onto the line. He rushes the quarterback from time to time. He's all over the field. He's a disruptor in many ways, and sometimes some of the things he does doesn't result in a stat, but it's helpful to what the overall scheme is of the defense is doing. So I'm back on the Barr train. I I hope he's not mad at me for what I've written. I'm just kidding. What I said. I want them to sign him. When they got this defense, a little more simplified back to where they were before, you saw him starting to play like he should, and I think that's what we have to focus on. The defense we saw the first 3 or 4 weeks was not the defense that's playing now. I mean, they're starting to perform much like they did last year, and it's great to see. And what a dominant performance last week. Put Barr in there, a healthy Barr.
Yeah.
It's even more so.
And they haven't done a ton. I know the talk about Barr this preseason was how often he was lining up as a pass rusher solely, and that was kind of his specialty coming out of UCLA. The fact that they haven't had to use that or haven't used it a ton, I mean, just in regards to some of the tricks they still have left for the playoffs, with Cook not playing that much this season, so they have a ton of stuff they can do with him. Maybe trick teams with throwing it when Murray's on the field, running a quick screen or something. They have all sorts of things that they can do that they just haven't had to do yet, and that's another testament to where I openly admit that I'm the more emotionally driven guy on this show or any show ever in the history of the world. But it's amazing what a difference a week can make. I mean, I'm already thinking in my head, okay, after the Saints game, I did a mid-season grades predicting the schedule or the rankings at the end of the season. I thought the Vikings were going to be, I think, was it 10? Well, something around a little bit above 500, and I feel, again, to tie a bow on all these conversations, a lot more bullish on this team. I really think that they are a top 3 team in the NFC for sure. That's really the last quick question I wanted to throw out there with everything going on this weekend, seeing where how the Packers game went, the Saints game. Where do you think this Vikings team stacks up going into the bye? If you were to do something top 3, top 5, just in terms of the NFC.
I'm feeling better than I did earlier in the year. The defense scared the living heck out of me early on because it was so counterbalanced to what we saw last year. Harrison Smith yelled at everybody, said every year's a new year, and that's true. But you shouldn't have seen players getting beat and looking confused and out of place like we did. They figured out what they need to do. Zimmerman was talking this week, and there's been stories that a lot of teams have copied his defense that he introduced with the double A guy blitz. And he says the Vikings aren't doing that. They're trying to go to do something else because people are going to be expecting that from them. So that is wonderful to hear. That to me is a coach who's proud and stubborn, but can also change when he needs to and realizes that nothing lasts forever. I got to keep innovating with this group and finding out what to do and how to make them succeed and put them where and not just say I got this great defense. Let's keep running. That's great, and that excites me. The offense is to me the biggest surprise / bonus for me this year. I was cautiously optimistic with Cousins coming in, but he's everything I thought he would be, and maybe even a little more in some aspects. I'm concerned about the offensive line like everybody is, but with Elflein back in, I'm seeing it improve in the run game with potentially a healthy Reef, and maybe even a developing O'Neal that they're going to be better there.
Bring Compton back.
Yeah, get Compton back, and so there's depth there. I don't think our depth is far away from our starters as it used to be, so that's a good thing. So I'm thinking, I'm feeling like they can go in November and December and really compete, and they can do some stuff. The schedule is going to be tough. The schedule is. It starts with this next game in Chicago, and if they go in there in Chicago and win, I said this about the Saints game. If they win that one, then we can really start thinking about them, for the second half of the season being, where they should be. they lost, but they shouldn't have, perhaps. A couple mistakes hurt them. They were right there with them, so I'm still bullish on the team. I like going forward, and I think, take care of the NFC North, and you guys are good to go.
Yeah, that's the way my brain works. If you want a terrifying insight into my life, every time now that the Vikings will win, I'll think of games like the Saints game and be like, damn it, they had that one. The record should be one game better. But it's true.
What burns me is the Bills. That's the one that I still look back at now.
Yeah.
Mad. I mean, that was the Bears just beat the Bills handily, and so did the Packers, and I can't remember what the Lions did, but I mean it's embarrassing at this point that the Vikings got.
I was thinking about this, and we'll end the show on this. Me and my dad, after games, I went to pick him up at the stadium, then we went out to visit my uncle at Fort Snelling Cemetery. And I was thinking about every post-NFC Championship loss that this team has had, the season. It's always been a nightmare. And this season really did have the workings for a nightmare. If you think about it, like all the injuries that they've had, especially having that hangover in the beginning of the season from the number one defense. But yeah, really the 8 injuries for starters last week. And I don't know if it's Cousins or it's Zimmer or if it's a combination, which it probably is. But this team is 5-3-1 going into their bye. They have control over their own destiny despite that kind of stuff, and I think that's different from what I'm used to. And we talked a lot about resetting the narrative with Kirk Cousins coming in, and not a lot of people focusing on the Eagles game as much this preseason because everyone was excited about the fancy new shiny toy. But it's true. They've really been able to do well despite things that historically might have hurt them. So
speaking of controlling your own destiny, folks, if you haven't done it already, go out and vote. Control your own destiny as much as you can.
I'm actually going to vote after we get off air this morning. So
it's easy to look at the numbers and say, "Oh my goodness, it's my one vote means nothing in millions." But when you're in there and you're in the voting booth, and it feels differently. It feels like I am doing something here. I am whatever it is. I am part of it. It's a great feeling. I did an absentee ballot vote yesterday for the first time in my life, and it was weird. I felt like I was going to Saturday night mass for Sunday. But I'm pumped to watch the results tonight. I'm a football fan, so it's going to be fun to watch them come in. So go out there and vote.
The adage is, if you don't vote, you don't get to complain, and I like that. That sums things up a little bit. So definitely go get your vote on. Keep an eye out on our social media, Twitter and Facebook. I don't know, Joe, if we should do the show this Friday or next Friday. Because we usually do a Tuesday and Friday show. Yeah. And looking forward to the game. There is no game, so keep an eye out. We'll figure out how that's going to work. Maybe we take next week off.
Look for my Vikings baiku stories. I have to buy haikus, Viking haikus on bye week. So. Bo Mitchell brought up an old Vikings journal thing that we used to do, so I've already started writing my Viking bye-week haikus.
Highlight. I said this last year. It's the highlight of the season.
Chirp on and comment with your own haikus.
And if you have a really good one, we'll send you a gnome. But this has been Morning Joe's. I wanted to thank everyone again for listening. Our audience grows every week. It's been really awesome, and it means a lot to us. So thanks again, and we'll be back eventually. Let's go.